Alright guys, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Jawad Scoring. How are you guys doing today? I have here with me my boy Fizzle, and today we have a jam-packed show for you guys. I have three amazing guests for you guys to come in and talk about disciplines that they work in. And first we have here Miriam, we have Mariana, and we have Yanni. Alright, excellent. So Miriam, being a specialist in your field, can you give us some information about global warming?
For the moment being, global warming is a serious issue that keeps getting worse and worse as the years go by. There's also a lot of sub-factors that go within global warming, like the overpopulation of the world. There's a food shortage currently, and also the melting ice caps in the northern parts of the world. So there's many other topics that we'll explore today.
So now we have Mariana talking about current issues that are happening around the world. So Mariana, can you give us some insight about what's happening around the world?
Sure. Currently, the main thing happening is Ebola. It originated in New Guinea. From speculation says it came from a bat, and the bat gave it to humans, and humans are passing it around. It made its way to Africa, and that's really where the problem is. It's in Africa, and it's making its way here. Ebola is very deadly. They haven't found a way to cure it yet. And once the body actually is dead, it's very hard to get rid of the disease. Morgues are not even able to decontaminate the bodies yet.
Alright, now it's excellent that especially like Mariana are talking about things like Ebola. It's good to make aware of what's going on in the country. Now we actually have Yanni talking about economics. So tell us, what are you going to talk about today?
Well, Jawad, I'm going to talk about the stock market because there are many jobs to be found with it. And the truth is, many kids, even whether they're in their young 20s or in their teens, don't really know how the stock market works. So I'm just here to explain how it works, because many of these people, even though they don't know what it is today, they could potentially be working with it in the future.
Well, Yanni, it's great you brought up the stock market, because many college students don't know that you can actually get jobs and work within the market itself. Now, as you can see, we have a great lineup of guests for you today, and we're going to continue this by starting a discussion. We're going to have different points of views coming in from different people on these different topics. Now, what I wanted to know was, Miriam, you're speaking about global warming, but what causes global warming? Like, what are I hear, littering and all that. Is there anything else that's a part of that?
So essentially, factory farming is one of the big factors that plays a big role in global warming, because we know that animals produce a lot of methane, a lot of CO2, which is carbon dioxide. So all that goes into the air, and it gets trapped within the atmosphere, and it always bounces back and forth between the atmosphere and the earth. So when that happens, essentially, all the heat gets trapped. And we know that heat is necessary for animals and for humans to live. But if there's too much heat, then it starts to mess up all the ecosystems, and everything is imbalanced within the air.
And apparently there's talks about carbon dioxide in the air today. Can you tell us something about the levels of carbon dioxide in the world today as compared to whenever back in I don't know how many years? Can you explain to us about the levels? How high they are, or anything of that sort?
Essentially, what we know today is that the carbon dioxide levels are at their highest that they've ever been, so they've reached their peak. And this is when it's becoming very problematic, because we don't know how to reverse it yet. So if the problem is if the carbon dioxide levels always keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger, we don't know how to reduce it yet. So it only creates a whole slew of problems that we have no solution for.
And what does this do to the polar ice caps?
So what we know is that the ice caps in the north and south pole of the globe are currently melting at an alarming rate. And what this does, since it's a block of ice, if it melts, it becomes water. And since it's melting into the oceans, then the ocean level rises, and people who are living basically on the coasts of these regions, they become flooded with water, and then they have no place to live, and then it ruins all the ecosystems as well. So it's pretty much like a cycle. All the ecosystems being the center of attention.
Thank you, Mir. We'll get into your part in a bit more detail later on in the segment. Now, Jawad, what do you think about global warming?
Well, actually, Fizzle, what I think is that, while I was in school, I was learning about global warming. Younger generations are learning about global warming. So, of course, I believe that it is an alarming topic, and everybody else in the country needs to be educated about this topic, right? So, what do you guys think about this?
Actually, Miriam, I have a question. Living in Montreal, should we be concerned about sea level rises since we live on an island?
Actually, we should be, since we are close to the Atlantic Ocean. It's not that we're neighboring the ocean, but since we're close enough, if the sea level rises, then the sea levels within the city of Montreal as well will rise, and so we'll have major floods all around the city and its surroundings.
Does anyone else have any other questions? Anything to add?
Well, how long do you think like it would take for sea levels to rise? Is it something that's possible in the near future?
Actually, within the next few decades, it's for sure a major problem that will arise because it's happening very quickly and very drastically.
All right, excellent, Miriam. Thanks for that. Now, Marietta, do you have anything to contribute to that?
Yeah, I do actually. I just wanted to know if there's any steps that we can take to actually reduce the harm to the environment.
There are a few steps that people can incorporate into their daily lives just so that they can improve the quality of the environment. So for example, people can start carpooling and taking public transportation to reduce their CO2 emissions. They can reduce meat consumption, seeing as the meat industry is one of the most polluting industries in the world. They can also just unplug their appliances at home when they're not using them, so it doesn't waste energy. And they can also recycle, which is a big factor.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Now, Miriam brought about some extremely interesting points, but what I want to know and what I want her to expand on a bit more is how the meat industry plays a role in global warming and increasing the rates of global warming. How does that work?
What most people don't know is that the meat industry is the most polluting industry in the entire world. When people think about global warming, they think that people don't recycle enough or that it's the transportation all collectively around the world that contributes to global warming, when in fact it really is the meat industry. What we see is that the meat industry there's a very high demand for it, so they keep supplying more and more each year, which then pollutes more and more each year, so it's a vicious circle. And the way that it pollutes is basically they're raising livestock. So they are using much of the land available that can be used either to plant trees to rejuvenate the oxygen cycle, the water cycle, but instead they're using it for animals to graze. And then all those animals, all the livestock that are using that land, their manure is extremely polluting. So if you multiply all of the animals times all the farms around the world, you have an enormous amount of manure, which is an enormous amount of methane and CO2, which then contributes immensely to global warming.
Now, you're saying manure is a problem, but a lot of the fertilizers today contain manure, right? So what's the point of it being like, okay, the animals are depositing their manure on the fields they graze on? Is that good for the earth? Wouldn't that be better for the earth?
Actually, what the meat industry does is that they took away the more natural manure-based fertilizer and replaced it with chemical fertilizer, which also pollutes immensely. So all the manure that is collected from all these animals is put into big cesspools where it just accumulates, and the manure itself causes the degradation of water, of the soil, and it pollutes the air immensely.
Does anybody have any ideas or any arguments to put against that? Anything against meat being, a big pollutant?
So Miriam, are you saying that you think people should stop eating meat?
I don't think it's realistic to say that people should stop eating meat entirely, because although there are some vegetarian nations, like India for example, where vegetarianism is extremely prevalent, I don't think it would be realistic to expect that the whole world would follow in India's footsteps. Although I do believe that it would be very easy for people just to cut down on meat. Like for example, if they reduce their meat consumption by 1 time a week, it would really help the environment immensely.
Alright, well, you said something about the consumption of meat rising every year, but I think that has more to do with the population rising as well. And I think it's unrealistic to say that people should reduce their meat consumption because, frankly, I think it's unhealthy. And many vegetarians suffer from iron deficiency, and they have different problems that meat eaters don't.
Exactly. That's exactly what I heard too. That people that consume a lot of vegetables and they are on this type of diet, paleo diets, whatever it is, that they tend to lack, vitamins, nutrients such as iron. So what do you think about that?
I've personally been a vegetarian for the past 3 years, and I can tell you, since I've been carefully following the diet, I have not had any of these problems. If people follow their meal plans properly, if they know what supplements to take if ever they need, if they're taking the right nutrients in the right foods, they should not have any problems. I have heard myself that people have had iron deficiency, but that's not necessarily because of vegetarianism. That can be due to hereditary factors or to environmental factors because of the fertilizers or chemicals in the product that they're eating. So there's a whole slew of factors that can go into being anemic. Not necessarily have to do with vegetarianism.
Well, actually, if you do suffer from iron deficiency, then you should be trying to incorporate as much iron as you can into your diet. Whether that be eating greens and beans or as much vegetables as you can, or even taking supplements for that matter. Then your diet should be catered specifically to your own needs.
And yeah, just to add, to answer your question about population growth, yes, the population is growing more and more each year, but if we raise the new generations to consume less meat, then demand for meat will eventually go down. So if we continue eating meat at the rate that we currently are, the problem will only worsen with the new generations to come. But if we teach them that meat is not everything and they have other options for protein, for nutrients and all that, it can greatly help the environment in the long run.
Well, excellent, Marian. Thanks for that. That was a great segment on geography. And when we come back from the break, we'll be back with Mariana talking about current events.
Forget it. You won.
You always give up.
Look at her.
Yeah, she is super fine.
No, she's not. She's a butter shoes.
What?
Butter shoes. Everything is hot but her shoes. I mean, look at that. Oh, I'm depressed right now.
Dude, I'm gonna be sick.
You gonna throw up?
Dude, I might.
Oh, wait a minute. I'm happy again.
Welcome back to Jawad's Corner. And for those of you who are just tuning in now, we just had a great segment on global warming and its effects on the world. Now, there are other things that are also affecting the world today and that are big issues, like Ebola and ISIS. Now, Mariana, can you tell us, what is this Ebola craze?
Ebola has been described as the most severe and most complex epidemic to break out in the history of epidemics. And it actually originated from Guinea in 2013, and we believe it comes from a bat. Thousands of people have died, and many are still at risk of contracting Ebola. The thing that Ebola is very complex. You can't catch it by just touching someone or being in the same room with someone. You need to come in contact. Your body fluids need to come in contact. So if someone coughs and it gets into your mouth or something, that's really how you're going to catch Ebola. It's not going to be just from standing next to someone who has Ebola.
Now, what I heard, this is what I heard. I don't know if it's true. Maybe you could tell me if it's a legible fact or not. When the person dies from Ebola, does the epidemic stay and can it be contracted whilst that person is dead?
It actually still can be, because once you do pass away from Ebola, the virus itself keeps on living. It's not gone until your body's completely dried out. As disgusting as that sounds, morgues are not even capable of handling and dealing with people who have deceased with Ebola, because they're just used to, once you die, the epidemic and everything just dies with you, and it goes away really quickly. But Ebola lives for quite some time.
And how does one get Ebola? How would I be able to contract it?
Well, as I mentioned before, you can contract Ebola from when your body fluids do come in contact. So those body fluids would be tears, mucus, saliva, sweat, urine, feces, vomit, semen, and vaginal secretions.
Now, it's interesting to know how this disease can be contracted, but what I want to know is, what's the survival rate?
The survival rate is 50 to 90% if it's caught in time. If not, your survival chances will drop down to 20%.
Well, I have a question. Many people fret about a disease being the cause to human extinction. Do you guys think that Ebola has the potential to wipe out humanity?
In my opinion, I think Ebola can become so widespread that it could wipe out humanity. Because right now it's an epidemic, which means that it's a widespread disease within controlled continents or countries. But I think it has the potential to become so widespread that it can become a pandemic, which would be an epidemic but on the world scale. And what also contributes to that is the fact that the symptoms are concealed for a 21-day period. So, for example, if you contract Ebola and I'm in contact with you, for those 3 weeks, for those 21 days, I will not know that you have Ebola. So you can potentially pass it on to me. and then I can pass it on to someone else and to someone else. That could create a major pandemic without people knowing about their symptoms. So yes, in my opinion, I do think that it can wipe out humanity, potentially.
In my opinion, however, to answer your question, I really don't think Ebola is gonna wipe out the world's population. Like personally, I don't want any of you to take it the wrong way, but I think people are overreacting to this whole Ebola issue. Like it's sure, people are contracting it, but out of the 7 billion people that are on this planet, how many have actually gotten the virus? You understand? Like only maybe I think I'm not sure here, but I believe the number is around 5,000 to 6,000 out of 7 billion. I really don't think this disease has any possibility of extincting the entire human population.
Well, excellent, Fizzle. That's exactly what I'm thinking, right? You can see that government services, health services are really acting fast to take advantage of the situation, quarantine everybody that's having Ebola, right?
Well, actually, that's not really the case. It's only people in developed countries like the US and in Canada that are being officially quarantined. In Africa, where it's the actual epidemic, the African countries don't necessarily have their government resources or the healthcare professionals to officially quarantine them and isolate them from the rest of the community. Most of these people live in rural communities, so they don't always have the resources available to them. So that can be very problematic.
Well, you see the reason for concern, because as Miriam said, it takes 3 weeks to actually know that you have the symptoms. But at the same time, Fizzle said that only 5,000 to 6,000 people have it, so there shouldn't be too much concern, right?
Well, again, going back to what you both said, maybe this whole epidemic might not turn into a world pandemic, but the situation should not be taken lightly. People are dying from Ebola, and the government is reacting really quickly. Anyone that does make a joke as if they have Ebola, they will be quarantined, as you all have seen with the situation with the plane.
What plane situation are you referring to? I'm not too sure I know what you're talking about.
Well, a couple of weeks ago, there was a man on a plane who broke out into a sneezing fit and joked saying, "Oh guys, maybe I do have Ebola." Well, no one really found that funny because they landed the plane right away. Everyone was quarantined. Guys walked in with these huge masks that they couldn't contract anything, and people were held there for 3 hours making sure no one was contaminated. But the government is really not taking this lightly.
Well, they shouldn't, because I don't see why anyone should joke about that either way. It's a big epidemic in Africa right now, and it's moving to the States, so I don't see why anyone should joke about that. And the government should take it very seriously.
It's not a laughing matter. People are losing their lives to this. So, as I said before, I don't think that it will contribute to the end of the world per se, but I do think that it is a very serious situation. A lot of people are losing their lives to this.
Exactly. And we're talking about Ebola, but I mean, there are other things that are going on in the country. Now, you actually mentioned earlier something about ISIS. Do you want to elaborate on that as well?
Well, ISIS is a group of Muslim extremists who are looking to form a caliphate within the
Well, I don't want to cut you off, but what exactly is a caliphate? Because I'm not too sure what's happening with the situation for ISIS right now.
Sure, a caliphate is a group of Muslim extremists who are looking to dominate the Middle East. They want their community to basically be led only by Muslim extremists. They don't have anyone else in their community.
So where exactly does ISIS stem from?
Well, ISIS stems from the idea of Al Qaeda.
Start your question.
So where exactly did ISIS stem from?
Well, ISIS pretty much started from Al Qaeda. In 2006, after the US defeated Al Qaeda, a certain part of Al Qaeda, which we can call ISIS, was not really okay. They didn't share the same beliefs and values as Al Qaeda. They were even more extremist than Al Qaeda was to begin with. In July, a man named al-Baghdadi decided that he would be the next caliph for this ISIS movement. And their main targets are Christians and other ethno-religions. In a nutshell, ISIS wants to return the Middle East back to the way it was 2,000 years ago. ISIS is committing a slow-motion genocide, basically, because they're targeting a certain specific group. Speculations say that ISIS will cause the Third World War.
All right, thanks, Mariana, for talking about those two pressing events. And we're going to go straight to a break right now. And when we come back, we'll be talking to Yanni about economics.
Welcome back to Jawad's Corner. Now we just finished with Mariana, who gave us an interesting insight on Ebola and ISIS. Now we're going to transition over to Yanni, who's going to speak to us about economics.
Well, Fizzle, I thought I'd talk about the stock market because I find there are a lot of people who don't actually know how it works. And sometimes it seems that it could be a bunch of numbers that are either going up or down, and at the end of the day, it's basically gambling, right? But the truth is, to every stock price, there's a reason why they go up or down, and that's based on supply and demand. So basically, if there are the more people that are selling it, the lower the price will be because you can get more of it. But if there isn't that many people that are selling it, then people will be willing to pay more because there isn't as much. But just to give an example of supply and demand, say the five of us just finished working out at the gym, and we were all very thirsty, and one person came across us and offered us a water bottle, but they only had one. Who would get that water bottle? Whoever was willing to pay more for it. And the truth is, all of us are thirsty for this water bottle, and we all want it. So let's say Fizzle offered $2 for the water bottle. Jawad would say, well, you know what? No, I can pay $3 because he wanted just as bad. And it would just keep going up and up and up until somebody said, okay, I'm not willing to pay for this anymore because the price is so high.
So it's basically like bidding, is what you're saying.
It kind of is, because the less there is of something, the more people are willing to pay to buy it, right? And if you flip the situation, basically, and the five of us are thirsty again, but this time there are 10 sellers, for example, the seller doesn't have any control over us because there's 10 of them, right? So like we'll all pay, and the sellers are basically competing with each other to sell at a lower price because they're trying to get rid of the water bottle. So basically, the way you can look at it is when there's too little supply, the demanders are competing with each other, and when there's too much supply, the sellers are competing with each other.
So it's always a question of competition between who wants what.
Basically, yeah.
Yanni, that was an excellent example. But what I want to know is, how does supply and demand factor into the stock market?
Well, the truth is, there are two crucial things in economics: the demand shifters and the supply shifters. Now, go back to the water bottle situation. A demand shifter would be how thirsty we are. The fact that we're thirsty is what's making the demand go up because we want that water bottle. But when we're talking about the stock market, being thirsty or present state doesn't really have anything to do with it. It's more about how the company itself that you're trying to buy a stock of from is doing. Okay. A demand shifter, for example, would be a rise in income. Right? Let's say everybody's income started to rise, more people would be willing to pay. Right? It could be in stocks. Right? It could be in anything really. But more people are willing to pay for the stock because their income has gone up. If it goes down, then the demand decreases because people aren't as willing to spend money. Now, for example, supply shifter is if the cost of production goes down. If the cost of production goes down, then there's more supply because the company can make more of whatever they're making. And if there's a change in technology, the supply would also go down because they've found a way to make more of what they're doing at cheaper prices because of change in technology. So an example let's say for demand for the stock market, if the company that you're interested in buying the stocks in reports that they've had like large increases in revenue, then more and more people are willing to buy stocks of that company. And why? Because what a stock is a share. You're basically buying a share of the company's assets. So if the company reports like strong earnings, then more and more people want in. So in the stock market, you're basically buying stocks from people who want to sell them for whatever reason they want to sell them. And what happens with the stock market is if everybody starts wanting to sell, which is what usually happens when prices start to get really, really high because the stock market is doing really well, people tend to panic and try to sell so that they can get their money as fast as possible. And when everybody wants to sell, that's when there are no buyers, and that's when the stock market can crash, right? And it's basically caused by panic. And that's how we get into recessions. And people are actually very scared right now because the stock market is doing as well as it has in years, and people are actually scared of a recession coming on to us.
So why should students be interested in the stock market?
Well, the thing is, like most students don't know about it, right? Like they know about it, they just don't know how it works. and they should be interested because most of them will end up working with the stock market in some way. Like their job could be directly related to it, or they can just have stocks on the side, which a lot of people do to make some extra cash. And that's just the truth. A lot of people buy stocks like when they're older.
Now, just for some clarification, I know many students have taken history courses and they've learned about the Great Depression. But can you just tell us the difference between a recession and a depression?
Okay. Well, what happened in 1929 with the stock market crash was that everybody panicked at the same time and everybody wanted to sell, right? And that's like there was literally no one buying. People were using money from the banks to buy their stocks, and once everybody started losing their money, they couldn't pay back the banks. Nothing. There was just an excess of debt, and there was no way of getting out of it. And that's basically what happened. A recession is not nearly as it's a smaller scale basically because people not everybody's panicking at the same time. It's just a smaller number of people, but it's big enough to cause a recession. To get a better idea of supply and demand, I'll relate it to why the gas prices are going down. A lot of people are wondering about that. And the reason why is because the supply of gas in the U.S. has risen dramatically. The U.S. has increased its domestic supply of gas by 50% since 2008, and it's had new technologies introduced, such as hydraulic fracturing and horizontal drilling. So they're getting more and more gas. So that's a big reason why the supply is going up, and that's why prices are going down.
Resources are a big part of economy, as I understand. What happens when there is overpopulation and the resources become scarce?
Well, the thing is, we live on Earth, right? We only have one planet, and our population just keeps growing and growing and growing, and the resources aren't growing as well. We have scarce resources, and that's one of the biggest problems in economics is we don't know how to spread the wealth, especially since people are just new people are coming onto this planet, and we don't have any way to provide them with the same as everyone else. So when Miriam was talking about population growth, she said that we have to lower our consumption of meat so that we could spread it better because as the population grows, we're only going to consume more meat, right? But what I was saying is that we should control our population because at one point the population is just going to keep growing and growing and growing and growing until we're completely out of resources, and that could be disastrous.
So thank you, Yanni, and I'd also like to thank Mariana and Miriam for taking the time to come to our show today. Unfortunately, we are running out of time, so me and Jawad will be back, however, to wrap up the show after this short commercial break.
Julio, I need to ask you a question. What is it, compadre? Did your mama get that hoodie at Kmart? Yeah, dog. Well, your mama must have cavities, because that hoodie is sweet.
Oh, yeah? Well, your mama's like a tasty cheese plate, because she served up a bunch of cheddar on them Kmart jeans.
Well, your mama's got so much game that she couldn't even store it on that tablet. Come on!
Your mom's so fashion forward, the future call, they want those hot tops back.
Well, your mama's so fiscally responsible, she got all that on free layaway.
Shop Your Way members get free layaway at Kmart. New school year starts here.
Alright, welcome back to Jawad's Corner. This segment is coming to an end. We had a great lineup of guests for you guys, but which really gets me excited for next week's show where we have two new amazing guests specializing in psychology and anthropology.
Well, you know, Jawad, I'm actually extremely excited for the psychology major that's coming in next time on our show, because I really think the brain is a magnificent organ, and it's interesting to know what it can and what it can't do, along with the behaviors that are associated with the thought patterns that we have throughout the day, and which can cause certain abnormalities and brain wave patterns. Now, what do you think about next week's lineup?
Well, actually, to be honest, I'm more interested in the anthropology major that's coming in. Myself, I've been interested in human evolution, and that's exactly what this guest is going to be talking about, right? So, I mean, I'm really interested in how we came about. Did we actually develop from, primates and stuff like that? So, I mean, we can only know that when we tune into next week's episode. Thanks a lot for tuning in, guys, and we'll see you next time.